Hey everyone. I feel like one aspect that really kills like the motivation of a streamer, what keeps them going, is having like their personal life details just being thrown out there and being torn apart by fans like hyenas. When someone's going through a tough event, they might already have like depression and having a lot of stress to the point that it feels impossible to come out of it. A lot of people even shut out friends and family because they don't feel comfortable talking about it or asking for help, which just makes it all the much worse when you have like tens of thousands of fans coming in from online just to talk about it. They may not even be discussing it in a negative way, more so like spreading around, giving it more light, which although isn't that bad, as in a person would much rather prefer having it preserved to themselves. But then on another band, you have people like shitting on the person relentlessly, just like kicking them all down, just because they want you. And no matter how thick of a skin you have, if your sole job as a streamer is to go online and interact with fans talking about your life, is it possible to not let it get to you? One example I could provide is Dante when he broke up with his girlfriend Laura, and you have people in his chat or from wherever just tormenting him about it. Not to mention very personal details being leaked to the public, just adding more fuel to the fire. And if you've seen clips of him talking about this and what it's caused, then you know what kind of reactions it got out of him. Now that is a completely different story, but I really could not help but tie some connection between that and his recent story and reaction from another popular streamer, Sketch. Some of you probably somewhat know him, but you see him like in other places apart from streaming, like on TikTok. But if you're a fan of him, then you more than likely know what I'll be talking about today and the horrible period he's been going through. A few days ago, fans discovered an OnlyFans account made 2 years ago with some gay content featuring a guy that looked a lot like him. It was just mainly speculation because fans really couldn't shake off how much it looked just like him. But as it turns out, in a stream he did a few days after the discovery, it was in fact him and his account. And the worst part of the story is just the emotional response he gave and reaction in that stream addressing it. When you imagine something like this coming out from a person, you imagine like they would mention it briefly and move past it, since there isn't anything massively wrong with it. It only really depends on the individual fan if they choose to disprove it and stop watching the person, but as a whole census, a fan base isn't gonna completely disappear out of thin air just from that. But if you watch Sketch's stream, he talks about with a heavy sense of guilt and regret, with just a tiny tinge of comedy, which I honestly do respect that about him, like I admire that.
I did not have sexual relations with that man! I'm just kidding, I did, possibly.
But apart from that, it really is like a depressing clip to watch of how like heavily ashamed he is of it, to the point that he admits himself that initially he was planning to quit streaming if this ever came out. And already that seems like way too much for something this minor, but at the earliest times of the leaks coming out, and it sucks to say this, but he admitted himself that ending his life was like an actual possibility that crossed his mind, simply from the regret and fear he had of this happening, since it was something he never wanted to be revealed, as well as reminding him of a very dark period where he also mentioned struggling with addiction at that time. As awful as that is, I am glad that a major pivot in the situation that helped him through this was the support from his parents and friends like FaZe Bank and Jinxie, which I think is great, not only for making him feel better and showing that it's not as shameful as he first saw it as, but also the streamers talking about it to get the people that are harassing him to stop and get his fans to support him more. This is really heartwarming to see, because even though it's like a very detrimental effect on Sketch's career from an outside perspective, because not that many fans actually care, the real weak point was his biggest fear that he's had for 2 years coming out and potentially causing the worst. Plus, with a lot of just lower life streamers, they will be friends with like other creators for the pure benefit of like getting more popular, but they will immediately drop off them like a leech the second they get like any negative attention towards them. Of course, I'm not saying I was expecting some of Sketch's friends to do that, but if he was like in a less fortunate crowd of just scummy creators and with a more bigoted fan base, this could have led to a much worse situation. But thankfully, he wasn't. And I think it's really important that he came out to talk about it, because it was probably like a harder choice to make at the time, but if he let the fear and regret stay with him by never addressing it, I think that would have caused more damage over time. But I should talk about now all the people, all the awful fans that like started this whole league and gave Sketch a lot of homophobic harassment. Because although, yeah, a huge part of his reaction was like the internal emotions, like looking back at it, the last thing he deserved was having more people attack him just for that. Not to mention the explosion they caused by spreading the leak everywhere, like immediately putting the spotlight on it, rather than patiently waiting for more stuff, more facts to come out about it. I think as a whole, Sketch's fanbase was intrigued by it, but only because it was a person that they liked and they never had any prior context to what it was about. The actual people that have been harassing him over it, I think it's just people that watch streamers, not including him, but they also love to just spread shit around. I mean, his fan base, their reaction has been really supporting, proving that they don't care that much. With streaming in general, you are bound to get degenerates like that, but I'm glad that the majority of his fans don't care about picking apart tiny bits of his personal life that just don't matter at all or affects the content that he makes. Despite that, it's still awful to see the way he's been going through this, but I am positive to say that he'll move past this and not seeing the same negative light that he's seeing it right now.